Welcome to Transformational Thinking for Health Leaders. I'm Dr. Fiona Day, Master Practitioner Coach and Chartered Coaching Psychologist. This is a podcast that will help you meet your most complex leadership challenges and transform your perspectives, helping you to become a more effective and creative leader with a deeper understanding of yourself and your own world of work. Dr. Girija Anand, informally known as Gij, has been a consultant clinical oncologist for almost 15 years. She is now also an associate medical director at a North London NHS Trust, where her responsibilities include clinical governance for doctors and professional affairs. Welcome to Transformational Thinking for Health Leaders, Gij.
Thank you, Fiona, for having me on your podcast. Very exciting.
Thank you for being here. So, Gij, please would you just tell us a little bit about your career to date and how you got into leadership roles?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona. So I was appointed to a substantive consultant role in 2011. So I'm a clinical oncologist by background. And I'd just finished my specialist training and had a few months off at maternity leave. And so I was really excited, starting my first consultant job. And then quite quickly realising that being a consultant is so much more than you're trained to be. So I think training has evolved nowadays, and that's definitely a good thing. And, leadership development's considered at an earlier stage, the importance of good communication and team working. But all of those things I felt I've had to learn on the job, more so as you go into more senior leadership positions. So back in 2011, so 1 year into the job, my boss at the time, my line manager, saw something in me at quite an early stage, and she asked me to take on the role of clinical lead. So just a year into the job, and usually it takes about 2 or 3 years to just settle being a consultant. I was obviously really overwhelmed at the time, and I thought, why me? But she said, no, you have to do it. So I kind of did it. And in those days, I saw myself in leadership roles as someone who represents a group of highly skilled professionals and serves to bring the team's sort of collective vision to fruition, if you like. I was looking for sort of quotes to kind of describe how I felt at different points in my journey. And I found one by Simon Sinek, who's an English-American author, inspirational speaker. And he said, leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. And it's really just understanding the team you serve rather than them trying to understand you, and to try and prioritise a feeling of fostering and a supportive environment to allow people to excel in what they do. So I think that really resonated with me at that time. So then a couple of years later, I moved on to become clinical director and then expanded my role because I started to look after other services other than just oncology. And so I did that for a couple of years. And around 2018, our organisation started to go through some changes, as organisations do. And I met a very dynamic, well-respected CEO of a neighbouring organisation. So he was just visiting our department. And I took him around the department, as you do, with the team. And he said to me that his own department at his trust was in need of some leadership. And he could see after visiting our department, the staff and patients looked very happy and positive. And he asked me, would I consider a joint role with his organisation? And the interesting thing he left me with is, just make it happen, Gij. And that was really challenging for me at the time, because I wasn't sure about how do you go about just making something happen. But obviously he was a very important person, so I'm sure he's had a few conversations. So at the time I decided to speak to my executive team, gauge where they or how they felt about it. And I also spoke to the executive team at the neighbouring organisation. And both sides, luckily at the time, appeared supportive of me taking on a strategic role for both departments. And so I did that for a year. Now, what was slightly more challenging at that time is we were not a merged organisation. So with two still very different hospitals, but we were doing some partnership work. And so that role, therefore, came with its own difficulties because it was very difficult to embed anything when we're still separate organisations. However, I think I took it in my stride at the time, and we agreed through a series of workshops that I facilitated that we would just have some common objectives and set some agreed goals within a set period of time. And at least then we would have felt that we'd done something useful together. And I have been described in my training days by one of my supervisors that I'm somewhat of a doer. And so for me, it was really important that we completed all those things that we wanted to do. And, we did at the end of the year. And I really do hope the team felt they achieved something together when we completed our projects. And some of those projects are still being used by patients, like sort of patient information videos and things like that. I then took a break from leadership for a couple of years. And actually, I found that quite tough. I realised then that change was a constant dynamic, and rather than watch from the sideline or resist, it was really important to be part of it, to influence it and its shape, and really to ensure that the clinical voice was heard and centred around what was best for our patients and the stakeholders. So in 2021, after a couple of years of break, so that was during the pandemic as well, so that came with its own separate challenges. But after then, I decided I was ready for my next leadership position. It was then that I applied for the role of Associate Medical Director. In fact, I remember my colleague calling me the day before I was about to go on holiday for 2 weeks when the role had literally just been advertised. And she said to me, "Gid, you have to apply for this job. You need to get a seat back at the table." So on reflection, I guess most of my leadership roles I've taken over the years have always required some encouragement from a peer or a senior leader or someone who saw something in me, even when I felt I wasn't ready. And I guess that is where I've got to where I am today.
Oh, thank you. What a wonderful story about how, you've been talent spotted, I suppose, and then kind of encouraged and supported into increasingly senior roles and being able to kind of learn and grow as you go. That's a really wonderful story. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess kind of moving from a clinical director post to an associate medical director post, it can be quite a big jump for people. I suppose I'm just curious what your experience was of this transition and how you navigated it.
Yeah, you're right. It was quite a big jump from in my medical leadership position. And I hadn't realised at the time how much of a jump it was. And I definitely suffered from a case of imposter syndrome those first few months. So my title, as you mentioned at the beginning, is Associate Medical Director for Clinical Governance and Professional Affairs. What does that mean? Well, I'm responsible for appraisals and job planning for the Trust. I'm also Deputy Responsible Officer, and I also have to deal with all the higher level disciplinary matters. And I had very little experience apart from a departmental level dealing with any of that, let alone trust-wide. And I was also stepping into the shoes of a very well-respected senior leader in our organisation who was about to retire, who'd held that role for a number of years. So I realised I had a lot of learning to do and very fast. So I booked myself on appropriate courses. I found myself a network of colleagues to support and advise me. I was fortunate to have maintained my relationship with this senior colleague who retired, who kept in regular touch with me for about 6 months into the job. And I also knew from past experience that I needed a coach, and that's when I found you, Fiona. You helped me find out what kind of leader I am, helped me reflect on my strengths and weaknesses, and really helped me grow my leadership style. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Pleasure. So there's kind of, quite a big transition to working at trust level, isn't it? And then I love how you kind of resourced yourself with building a team around you, because I really think it takes a team to grow a leader. And I really love how the outgoing person from that role kind of kept their hand in and just kind of supported you a little bit through that transition as well. So thank you for sharing that.
I was actually really grateful for that, because I remember initially we set them up as sort of weekly meets, and then it became fortnightly, and then it became monthly, and then after the second monthly meet, she said to me, "Girija, I think you're all right now. You don't need me anymore." And it was perfect. I'm so grateful that she gave me her time. She didn't need to. She'd left the organisation, but she obviously cared about what happened, and she mentored me through that. So I'll always remain grateful to her. Miss Frances Evans, I'd like to name her. She's a consultant obstetric gynaecologist.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know you're very much still a practicing clinician, Gidge, and I suppose I'm curious as well how you balance your clinical and leadership roles and how you maintain your work-life balance.
Oh, gosh, Fiona, it's an ongoing challenge. That was one of the main reasons I sought you out, how to manage work-life balance. I do believe that to lead effective change, you have to be part of it and experience it from within to truly understand its impact. And there was a quote from a Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu, who says, to lead people, walk beside them. So true leaders don't lead from afar. They walk alongside their team, sharing their challenges and successes and empowering individuals to contribute their best. So I guess on the flip side of that, there are only so many hours in the day, and trying to do it all can start to blur boundaries in one's home life. And I experienced that definitely quite early in my previous operational roles. And taking a break from leadership in 2020-21, as I mentioned before, I started to appreciate all that I'd missed at home. And I think the pandemic taught all of us that as well. I was really keen that this time, with this new leadership role, that I had to be more strict about my time. And I guess I've done this, and I'm not always brilliant at it, but I do try and remember everything that we discussed and, some of the things I've learnt myself, that you need to build a team of trusted individuals who can support me in what I do. And now I can delegate some of my day-to-day commitments. And sometimes when I am feeling a bit overwhelmed and there's a lot to do, to just say to my team, I need some help. And they have never let me down. They've always come to my help. I've also learnt to carve out me time. I put it in my calendar now, and the importance of regular exercise. I know we always talk about it, but that's so important for well-being. And if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after others. And during the pandemic, we got a lockdown puppy. I got a little Pembrokeshire Welsh corgi, and taking him for walks and getting the fresh air always helps as well.
So something around being very kind of conscious about making sure you're taking care of yourself, because, I say to all my clients, radical self-care is the foundation that everything else is built upon, both your personal and your professional life. So it sounds like, you've been taking that quite seriously in terms of your commitment to it, and that kind of being outside, exercising with the dog, all of these different things all help you. But also what I heard you say was about asking for help from the team when you need it as well, and that kind of being willing to ask for help. Sounds like that's been a really helpful strategy for you as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I know, Girija, your trust is currently exploring closer working and a possible merger with another trust. And, I guess I'm not surprised to hear that you're now taking an active role in oncology leadership across these two different organisations. And I'm curious, Girija, about how that's likely to be different in terms of, the role from your experiences of leading internally. And I know you've kind of had a little bit of experience of working across two departments before, but I guess this is a much kind of bigger scale, isn't it? So, just tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, so as you just said, my organisation has recently agreed, so just earlier this year, in fact, to merge with the neighbouring organisation. And, that process has been underway. And some of that work has obviously been going on for over a year. But in terms of our department, we really only found out that they were going to fully integrate our department in the wave one of the integration plan. So there were 4 services identified. Oncology was one of them, and this was agreed at both executive boards. So once again, I found myself approached by the medical directors of both organisations asking me to be the clinical lead for the oncology integration plan. It was not a role I intended to do. I definitely had enough on my plate. I was very happy in my role, and I even suggested the name of some colleagues who I felt might be interested or capable to lead on this project. And I was categorically told, no, it had to be me. So that was interesting. And as always, had my slight feeling of being a bit overwhelmed. And then when I sort of sat down, reflected and sort of thought it through, I decided on a few things. So what I insisted on quite early was that my counterparts, so the lead for the other department, the other organisation, if you like, should jointly work with me on my integration plans. There was no way I was going to do this myself, because in my previous role, when I tried to manage both departments, I was trying to do it myself, and that was really difficult. And I realised that, with transformational change, you need to make sure that both organisations' voices are heard from both teams, and teams feel most comfortable talking to their own leads, not to a lead who may still have the interests of both departments, but they don't perceive it that way. So as we've progressed with our integration plans, we've developed a few work streams as part of our patient benefit case, looking at some key areas. And we have still used the ethos of collaboration. And for each of those work streams, we've appointed joint leads from each department, so enabling that voice to be heard. And I feel it's brought the teams together in what we believe is a really effective way. The other thing that we've learned is you can never over-communicate. It's always important to be honest, open, and as transparent as possible, and equally to be very consistent with the messaging. I do feel very fortunate and lucky to work with wonderful colleagues who truly care about the patients and the service we provide. That really is most of the job done. I feel leadership is really just pulling it all together.
Yeah, I guess there's you're very much kind of taking on a role of being a leader of leaders here, aren't you? Using very much a kind of distributed leadership model and building capacity within those two departments so that you can do the work that only you can do. And it's very difficult bringing two different cultures together. So it sounds like you've got some really strong foundations in place around that. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess, as we kind of pause and kind of take a little bit of a broader look at you yourself as a leader, Girija, I suppose, what do you feel your key insights are? And I guess I'm curious about this kind of you constantly being tapped on the shoulder by others to take on various leadership roles, even when you're trying to find potentially others to do it, and it wasn't necessarily things that you had thought you were going to be interested in doing. But what is it, do you think, that people see about you, and what's your own kind of insights and reflections about yourself as a leader?
I guess it's my democratic style, and that's the way I've always seen myself as a leader. But as you know, there are different styles of leadership, and effective leaders are able to flex their styles according to the circumstance. When I did my coaching session with you quite early on, you recommended I do a 360 leadership multi-source feedback. And that was really helpful for me, I think, at the start of my associate medical director role, because it provided me some valuable insights into my own qualities as a leader. I realised I'm much more than a democratic leader. I seem to have quite an equal distribution of leadership styles, things that I hadn't been aware of. So although my strengths seem to be engaging teams and bringing people together and having insights, I didn't think I was as good at evaluating things and having a visionary hat on. But my teams that I work with, or colleagues that I work with, seem to think that I have those skills. So maybe I underestimate those things in myself. And obviously, another bit of feedback that came is that I'm a very good listener. And I guess by listening to people, you create your vision because you bring it all together. And yeah, that's another thing that I learned about myself over the last couple of years.
So these are very much, your kind of hidden strengths, aren't they? The kind of the things that you didn't know about yourself, but you kind of will now have greater insight into. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think listening is, one of, if not the most important leadership skills in so many ways. And for people to really feel heard, it's a real kind of gift that you're giving them as a leader, I think. So thank you for sharing that. And I suppose I'm just curious then about, as you look back over your career so far, I'm sure, you've got a long way ahead of you yet in terms of things that you're going to go on and do, which I'm really excited for you about. But I guess kind of looking back, what is it you feel most proud of as a health leader, Girija, do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona, again. So I haven't done a huge variety of roles. The only other role that I did externally was with the Royal College of Radiologists. I sat on the faculty board for clinical oncology, and that was quite interesting because that was setting national priorities. But unfortunately, that fell in the middle of COVID, so it was quite difficult to take anything forward. So when I thought about this a little bit more, I think for me at the moment in my career, the thing that I look at most proudly is when I was clinical director, because I felt in that time we were in a very difficult spot when I took on the leadership. We were under-resourced in terms of workforce. We had very old radiotherapy equipment, and there was a number of things that needed sorting out through business cases. And through a lot of hard work, we worked together and managed to get a lot of those business cases approved. And I felt the department really thrived because that brought in energy, because we brought in resource, which allowed us to all sort of flourish in what we were doing. So for me, that's probably my proudest bit of my career. I mean, I obviously really enjoy what I'm doing at the moment, and I'm in the middle of a merger, so we'll see how that pans out in the next year or two. And I hope I can also look back and see that some of the visionary stuff that we want to lead and develop in the next couple of years really comes into fruition for our patients. And I guess my other more sort of wider success is my ability, I hope, to bring people together for a common purpose. So I think I help facilitate that, and to enable people to have a voice, to have a sense of belonging, respecting and listening to staff, giving them autonomy and a sense of purpose is what I believe makes them happy. And I think this is crucial to the long-term success of the team, and we know this leads to delivering better patient care.
Well, wonderful to hear all of that. And, it's an amazing thing to transform the estate, isn't it? And to get resources into a team and a department, and to be able to, offer a higher standard of service. And then, in what you're doing at the moment, to hopefully have a successful integration of these two different services to better improve the health of the population. So thank you ever so much, Girij, for taking time out of your busy day to talk with me today, and really wish you all the best for all the roles that you're doing and into the future. Thank you ever so much.
It's been a pleasure, Fiona. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this podcast and would like to find out more, head over to www.fionadayconsulting.co.uk and you'll receive 3 hours of free CPD, the Health Career Success Programme, when you sign up to my newsletter. And there's loads of other resources to support you as a medical or public health leader on my website too. Thanks for listening.